While the South Carolina General Assembly is in its summer recess, State Senator Marlon Kimpson is helping his constituents. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with him one-on-one. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Senator Kimpson, you know, the last time I saw you was at the Charleston Forum, and I believe that was right before the second anniversary of the Melvin Emanuel tragedy.
Yes.
Tell me and catch me up about what's going on with you right now.
Well, we're on summer break. We go back to the legislative session in January. So generally speaking, I'm doubling up my efforts at my full-time job, which is practicing law at Motley Rice. But in addition, with respect to my Senate obligations, I use this time to have one-on-one meetings with constituents and keep my ear to the ground in the district for how I might be a better public servant and gain ideas from people in the district about legislation that might be important to them. One of those is housing. As you know, I have filed an inclusionary zoning bill.
Right.
And what we saw last session was it needed a little work. And so the prudent thing to do, which I'm doing, is meeting with those who express some reservation about the legislation and trying to build a consensus among the people that weren't supportive, but at the same time not tweak the bill so much so that it loses its essential purpose, and that is to have a robust plan for affordable housing all across the state. It's a statewide issue. And so as we make the tweaks, we got to make sure that we don't pass. I'm not into passing legislation just to feel good. I want it to be meaningful, and I refuse to compromise on amendments that will gut the essential purpose of the bill.
You talk about keeping really your ears to the district. Let me take you to something that's very developing, and you know a lot about this. And this is a headline from WISTV.com. Governor Henry McMaster is actively pursuing sale of Santee Cooper to help finish part of VC summer. Where does your mind go to when you hear this?
Well, I applaud the governor in this respect because I think with a debacle of this magnitude, all options, including the sale of the facility, should be on the table. Of course, the sale would shore up the financial commitment to finish the project. And so the goal here is to really not just find out what happened and point fingers, but see if there's a viable solution to going forward. We're talking about $9 billion or more. We're talking about close to 6,000 jobs. And we're talking about essentially a whole county, Fairfield County,
right,
being dependent on that project for all sorts of reasons. Not to mention the $80 million in tax revenues it would have received if the project would have continued going forward. And so this, I think all options have to be on the table. In terms of what I am doing is I have been reading about the legislation, the 2007 Base Load Review Act, which essentially allows, and I'm paraphrasing, but essentially allows the utility companies to pass this charge on, whether it's completed or not, to rate holders. I think we are bordering on, if not already there, some breach of fiduciary duties on behalf of the board members and directors and chief executive officers. And I think part of the probe should be focused on what information was disclosed, whether or not that information was accurate, and who knew what and when. You know, we got a public service commission.
Right.
According to the newspapers, they were blindsided. Well, how a agency who's in charge of our utility rates can be blindsided by a $9 billion project that's being abandoned is unbelievable. And so we need to find out, more information. But in the meantime, I am very supportive of the Speaker's position to immediately halt the rate increases. In fact, I'd go a step further to look at the past rate increases to see if any misrepresentations were made to the PSC and other state regulatory officials. And if so, there's a legal principle that we used called unjust enrichment. And that stands for the simple principle that people should not be able to enrich themselves if the information that was communicated was misleading and false. And I'm specifically referring to the more than $20 million in bonuses that the CEOs and board members of SCANA and SCNG and Santee Cooper received. In my opinion, depending upon how those bonuses were awarded, particularly if some of the compensation was due in part to their management of this facility, should be returned back to the shareholders and at minimum contributed towards supporting. It's a drop in the bucket as you compare it with $9 billion, but every dollar counts when we are trying to figure out how to make this project a going concern in the future. And so the inquiry doesn't just stop at the rates. The inquiry needs to go back further. And I think that would be the appropriate due diligence that both committees in the House and the Senate are charged with. And personally, I plan to ask those questions at the appropriate time. So all options are on the table, and we want to make sure that the people and the ratepayers and all of the governmental entities that were involved recoup all of the money that's due.
Matter of fact, I saw your tweet that basically says this right after the state's headline that says this: days after abandoning nuclear project, SCANA says it earned $121 million last quarter. You basically said this, quote, "This ain't right," unquote.
It ain't right. And so, look, I'm all for people making money. But we want to make sure that to the extent there were misrepresentations made, that people don't enrich themselves by getting in a modus of operandi where they're doing so at the expense of others, particularly when it involves public utilities, which the General Assembly and the Public Service Commission is responsible. And so, it's a point of inquiry that we will be spending a lot of time over the next few years. But all options are on the table. Legislative, I assume there may be some pending litigation, and other modes of bringing the parties together to find a long-term solution to this issue.
Catherine Templeton. As you know, she came under fire for some controversial comments regarding the Confederacy. And you basically said this, quote, "We worked hard across racial and political lines after the shooting to bring people together. We need to move forward, not backwards." When you think of her and her comments, what sticks out to you still?
Well, let me say this. I know of her,
Right.
But I don't have a close personal relationship with her. So I don't know what was in her mind.
Sure.
All I know is that people of goodwill, black and white, people across political lines,
Sure.
Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, we all worked as a state to foster the compromise, which was, when I probably compromise isn't the best word, but the legislation which removed the Confederate flag from in front of the State House. We spent a lot of time on that. We spent a lot of time bringing healing to the state in the aftermath of the Mother Emanuel. No doubt Dylann Roof was a racist, a homegrown terrorist, had a gun and committed murder. That whole act covers several different subjects that are polarizing in and of itself. But the state came together. And I have serious reservations of any educated person who witnessed all of those acts and how this state pulled together and put it behind us. I question the credibility of someone who would make those remarks, particularly someone who's educated. And so, whereas some people have characterized her remarks as politically expedient, if politics was part of the calculation, then certainly I would not want to be governor, playing those kinds of politics, trying to pander to a group of people, when in fact we rolled up our sleeves and we used our best efforts to put this matter to rest. Now, to be sure, there are some people who are still hurt in our society over this issue. There's an appropriate place for history, and that's a museum. I think we don't want to spend too much time revisiting the past. We want to move forward. And where we're moving forward is, you look at our state, we have been very privileged to have international companies moving to Charleston. Many of those businesses expressed an appreciation for putting that symbol that was so polarizing behind us. Leadership is not pandering to extreme fringes. Leadership is being honest with people and trying to, even though politically unpopular, taking a firm stand because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do to move forward from that debate and not pander to special interest for the sake of political expediency.
Speaking of museum, the International African-American Museum, they had this headline from the Post and Courier. It says this: Charleston's African-American Museum gets $500,000 boost from Michelin. What is the future of the International African-American Museum in your mind?
Well, I think it's bright. If I could just convince my colleagues in the State House, where the museum will be located is the site of at least 48% of the Africans who arrived on the shores of this nation, enslaved, landed. In other words, that was the port that they were brought in. As torrid and painful as that the history needs to be told, and where better, what a more appropriate place to be told is where the Africans arrived on the shores of this nation. That's part of our history. It will be a museum. I think tourism-wise, it will be a boost for tourism. Substantively, I understand the leadership of the museum is working on telling the true story in a way that is unique because of where we are located, but also tracing the Middle Passage. and not just focusing on slavery, but the civil rights movement in the aftermath of the Emancipation Proclamation and going forward to us gaining our rights and civil rights and right to vote, etc. So it will be a journey from inception to where we are today. And South Carolina needs that. We need something that we can call home and that tells our story. There are other museums that focus on other things, but I think that, and that's important. As I've mentioned,
Right.
the appropriate place for the Confederate flag is a museum, and that story should be told in a museum. What we're talking about here is an African-American museum that tells the story, and I think that's important. Now, I think the project is robust because although we did not get the funding, we're now seeing last legislative year, but previously we've gotten I think 15 million from the General Assembly in 5 million increments. So previously for 3 years the General Assembly has funded $5 million increments. We did not this year. I think it was politically divisive. I think that the project failed in the House. There are some House members that don't want to see the museum put up, and so we came up with, or they came up with some excuses for not granting the funding request. But we're now seeing private individuals, private companies step up and say we want us, and indicate their willingness to want to see the museum by putting money up. And I would encourage people who want to see that museum to send in a contribution such that the project can be viable. Next year, I plan to go to the floor of the General Assembly, as I have the past 4 years, and ask for the money. That's my job as a state legislator representing this area, but more importantly, I think it's the right thing for the state to do. And so hopefully we can answer the questions posed by the House members that were reluctant to fully fund the request. Keep in mind, the Senate, it was part of the Senate budget, I believe $4 or $5 million. But when you have the House budget different from the Senate budget, you have a compromise committee, and you have to compromise, and that provision didn't make it in the compromise.
You talk about the House. Let me talk about somebody you know very well, and he's vying for a seat for House District 113, and that is Marvin Pendarvis. Describe what Marvin means to you.
First of all, let me say this. I'm glad that there are candidates, running for Seth Whipper's seat. I think it's good to have a robust debate about issues, and may the best person win. I've looked at the three individuals on the Democratic primary side, and I applaud people wanting to run for office. All of them are good people.
Sure.
But in a race, you have to get behind who you consider would be the best candidate and make the best House representative. I believe that is Marvin Pendarvis. His training, his background, he's from that area. Of course, that's not a prerequisite because I'm not from Charleston, but I'm the senator from District 42. But he was born and raised here. He did what he was supposed to do in life. He went to law school. He went to college.
Right.
He's a public servant. When I was campaigning the first time, Marvin would always show up, be willing to help. He wrote a couple of my briefing papers on criminal justice reform. He's working with me on housing, and this was well before the Honorable Seth Whipper decided to seek a magistrate's appointment. So Marvin has been there. I know him. He has the intellectual appreciation of the issues, And quite frankly, we need someone who's going to hit the ground running from day one, who's versed on the issues happening in the district, and to share the workload. Representative Mack has his hands full.
Right.
He's been a soldier for a long time. Wendell Gilliard, you see him everywhere. And Seth Whipper, when he was in the House, he was carrying his weight.
Right.
Marvin, I think, will exceed all of us in a different way. Exceed all of us. He has the tenacity, the perseverance. And I'm enthusiastic about him, so much so I'm going to hit the campaign trail when we can get our schedules together to campaign for him, because I think he's the best candidate.
The Johnny Cochran Soaring Eagle Award from the Minority Caucus of the American Association for Justice. Where were you emotional when you received that particular award?
Honestly, Quintin, it came out of the blue. I couldn't be more humbled. The American Association for Justice is the largest plaintiffs' trial lawyer group in the country, probably in the globe. On the globe, this association, all of the lawyers involved work on behalf of ordinary people seeking justice in a variety of ways. Within the group is the Minority Caucus. All of the minority, people of color, gender, have a caucus to make sure that diversity issues are the board and lawyers across the country are up to speed on the latest case law with respect to issues that are important to the diverse community, not just race but also gender. And also preference. And so marital preference and gay and lesbian, just a whole host of issues that this caucus works on. I got a call sitting at my desk over there and from the incoming president, who Derek Walker out of Virginia. And he said, I hope you're going to be in Boston because you're up for an award. And I didn't ask him at the time what award. He called back to get my bio and headshot, and the information came that I was getting the Johnny Cochran Soaring Eagle Award. And I think subsequently, first I called my mom and my dad, and then my wife.
Right.
It might have been the other way around, but my wife and my parents, those were the first people I called.
Yes.
And, it's an humbling achievement because there was a group out there, a group of people who are well up to speed on people who are making a difference.
Sure.
And it came to my attention that they viewed the actions in the aftermath of both the Walter Scott shooting and how we championed the body camera legislation. I was the co-sponsor of the Senate bill that passed to create body cams in the state of South Carolina and mandate that patrol officers wear them. We're retooling. I got legislation to improve the legislation we passed to require them to have it on at all times. That's a problem we got to address. And criminal penalties if they don't have it on, and if someone intentionally deletes the footage. But body cam, they were aware of what we did there. And then in the aftermath of the flag, the Confederate flag debate, in the aftermath of the Mother Emanuel shooting, church shooting, we got the Confederate flag down from in front of the State House. Those people from around the country saw the leadership on the floor, and they were appreciative of my involvement. And that's why I feel so passionate with regards to your question earlier. We worked hard. We brought the state together. Now is a time to continue forward progress. But people out there across the country, they saw that. And guess they wanted to reward me by the top award of the Minority Caucus in the American Association for Justice. So I received it honorably. And I am, I think that's it back there. I plan to put it on my desk, by the way. It shouldn't be back here in the conference room. But, I take that as a symbol of appreciation, and it makes me even more charged to do the work of the people. And so I'm fired up, and I will continue to be ready to go.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, Senator Marlon Kimpson, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do.
Oh, thank you. Anytime.
All right.
Thank you.